Welcome to Space Insiders. I'm Tony Sewell and here with my mate Rob Ruyak. How you going, Rob?
Great, Tony. How are you? Always good to
Uh,
see you, man.
I'm good. Things are pretty humid down here. How are things up in DC?
Great, actually.
Are they?
It's
Nice.
just we had a cold front come through, and it's actually pleasant for once. It's been a rough summer.
Yeah, it has. I'm looking forward to fall. All right. We have a really good guest today. We just wrapped up interviewing with her, Erika Wagner. Um, I learned so much during this interview, Rob. Will you tell us a little bit about Erika?
Erica is a great personality, big personality, always smiling, and the background is just unbelievable. I mean, PhD at MIT in both aerospace and biomedical engineering, 12 years, I think more than 12 years at Blue Origin. She built the X Prize lab at MIT, like from scratch, from nothing. She ended up at Blue Origin leading payload sales for New Shepard, worked at the Orbital Reef Commercial Lunar Destination Program. She's AIAA Associate Fellow, and she's also done a few TEDx talks, which are really good, and I recommend people watch. So yeah, she's great, and right now she's at the exploration company, which is based out of Europe, and just had a great conversation with her.
Yeah. And I think what people will really get out of this interview is a perspective of some of the applications of human spaceflight and commercial space stations that I hadn't fully sort of connected the dots on, as far as advancement of science, medical technology, chip technology, manufacturing, how a zero gravity environment can actually be a massive accelerator to development and technology of things we benefit from on Earth. So if you think that is interesting, I think you'll find this really interesting. It was fascinating for me.
I loved it because you hear and read about how important the space station is for research and development, and you kind of wonder, well, what really is that?
Yeah,
Like, why, what is it about it? And I feel like it's kind of hard to fully grasp why there's value there. I think just, you and I being in the industry for a long time, I feel like there's two things I keep hearing about. One is it's really great for vaccine development. Okay, but why? And then the other one is you hear a lot about fiber optic cables for some reason. And I just never really, I've always wanted to understand like what are all the other applications because frankly, with this commercial push to have more space stations and frankly not less of them, uh, and then with NASA trying to take a back seat and be more of an anchor tenant and a contributor to it and not like the owner operator, there's got to be some sort of a free market system around this whole thing. So I think better understanding what the value is of microgravity and what kind of products can be built differently and for what purpose, and what kind of value does that create where you can actually produce that down here on Earth is really interesting. And I don't know if I've met anyone that has more experience and or thoughts on what that could look like over
yep,
time than Erica.
yep. So we're not going to give it any more away. You
No.
need to listen to the episode. All right. So just quickly, a couple of news stories that caught my eye this week, Rob. The first one is a little bit. I don't know, it's interesting, perhaps a little bit sort of concerning for me. NASA is getting out of the Earth science game. They're significantly reducing their money that they spend on that. And I think when you read the headline, I think a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, NASA, they're about doing stuff in space." But I don't think a lot of people realize, I guess, the impact of NASA's investment in Earth science, Earth observation, how that impacts things like climate change, understanding weather patterns, and just all of a lot of the products of Earth observation science. And I think also a lot of space startups really benefit from this investment because NASA, they're better. Commercial industry is better at carrying out these missions than a big government agency. What are your thoughts on this one, Rob?
Yeah. I don't know. All politics aside, it's I guess all I have is really questions. Like, I'm
Mm,
sure there's a lot of stuff out there that's been funded historically for many, many years that might not be as relevant now. I have no idea,
yeah,
but there's a lot of things that we all know that the government funds that serve a whole multitude of downstream purposes. Like, for example, you know, uh, weather, studying weather. I know a lot of that's NOAA, but there's a lot of things that NASA also does to actually produce information and data that help feed these weatherization models for a whole bunch of different purposes. I think with weather, we all know why it's important. Like, we see it every day. It informs decisions that we personally make. It informs decisions that industry makes. It actually also will continue to inform decisions that defense national security makes as well.
yeah,
I was actually just listening to a podcast on Defense One, and it was a panel about the Golden Dome. And there's a question that was fielded to the panel around the use of, we call it, there's this whole concept of space based interceptors. And with this new Golden Dome initiative, people are asking the question, well, what does that really look like? Is it shooting a missile down with another missile? What about the laser thing, right? I don't know enough about it, but all I know is that one of the experts said, well, the biggest problem with lasers is it really can't it doesn't it's not effective in a cloudy environment or
mm,
an environment with bad weather.
attenuation.
So it's going to depend on a lot more advanced weatherization models,
Mm,
because that is actually going to
interesting.
potentially determine
If,
quickly what is
if
the
you can
right way
employ
of
it,
intercepting
yeah,
something, right?
yeah,
So I bring that up because I don't know. I have a feeling that I think the research around all this is important in a lot of different ways, but there could be some downstream impacts that maybe people aren't thinking about that they probably should, that are going to be really, really important. And I'm not saying defense and national security is the only thing, but
yeah,
also universities and schools and our children, and what
yeah,
they learn in schools, right? And having that, there's a lot around space exploration and research that actually is so inspirational. It actually propels more innovation in different ways. And so I hope that's not
yeah.
impacted as much as we think it could be.
Yeah, there's a lot of international cooperation as well. Like I think they say in the article that the NISA project, that's one that's being done with India, that's
Hmm.
not going to be impacted. But and there are others like programs with ESA and whatnot. But
Yeah.
anyway,
What,
that'll
what's your
be
what's your opinion on the catapulting satellites into space?
okay.
That was
Yeah,
interesting, right?
so that's another one. So it's a company called Spin Launch have a rather novel way, or they're developing a novel way to shoot things into space with basically a giant centrifuge. But they've already raised about, I think it was about 210 million. So like they've got some serious funding behind them, and they've just raised a C round of 30 million. And they're largely investing it into Leo constellation, a 280 satellite Leo constellation, which I don't know, it's kind of curious to be getting into this space. I'm not sure what the application is. It's interesting. They have a guy that I know actually, their new CTO, Masi Ladavaz, previous CTO of OneWeb. He's been at exec at SES and Inmarsat, so he's a serious guy. This is an interesting development for this company. I don't know what they're going to use it for, but interesting time to be launching another Leo constellation.
It's just I know I feel like it's just another proof point that there's so many use cases, I think,
Yeah,
with space that I mean, I wonder. I'd love to talk to them, by the way, Tony. We should
yeah,
talk to them
we should.
because I just wonder, is there something specific about their constellation and how, I don't know, the buses are developed that can't be launched on a rocket, but they're better served with the centrifuge. I mean,
They're
for
not
very,
launching it with a
I don't.
centrifuge, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
Well, in the article they talk about, I think they're gonna use some other launch vehicle, a
Oh,
more
okay.
conventional
Interesting.
launch vehicle.
Okay. Interesting.
At least for the initial tests, I think they're planning to launch something next year. Because I don't think they're at full scale for the to launch something into orbit yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. It's interesting.
it is. All right. I think we should probably get to the interview. One quick shout out. Hopefully, you've seen it on our socials, but we have an X channel. We're going to give that a go. I've been away from Twitter for a few years, so we'll see. We'll see how we go. We 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 thought that would be a there's a technology and spaces. There's a lot going on in that media ecosystem. So we thought that made a lot of sense. We've also launched the website so that we can create more of a central focal point for so that people can learn more about the people we're interviewing, access blogs, so you're not having to search through social feeds to find things. So yeah, make sure you check those out. But with that, I think we should get to our interview with Erika.
Let's do it,
See you
Tony.
in a minute. All right, welcome back and g'day, Erika. Thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Good to
We're
see you, Erica. Thanks again.
really excited to have you here today, and I love the conversation we're going to have today because I feel like we've been building up to the area of your expertise. Like we've talked to people that have designed spacesuits, we've talked to people in the launch industry, and now to have someone that has such a unique background combining aerospace and biomedical engineering. I'm really interested to learn a lot today. So I'd love to just start like what got you into this and just tell us a little bit about how your sort of career has progressed to date.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tony. Let me just start with I'm a nerd for life. I have been excited about space since before I can literally remember. By the time I was in kindergarten, my parents were already stacking my bookshelves with space books and a telescope in the corner. So I think I'm one of those people who was lucky to find a passion when I was really young. And it was sparked by the early shuttle missions. It was sparked by the legacy of Apollo. It was sparked by the dreams of wanting to go there myself and to be an astronaut, to see
All
space,
right.
to see Earth from space. Haven't gotten there quite yet. That's still on
Yeah.
the bucket list.
All right.
But at the end of the day, I was a science kid who loved to solve problems, and so that pushed me towards engineering. It pushed me towards going to make a difference in the world in that way. And I started to realize that there was this opportunity at the intersection of where astronauts were flying and where engineering was happening. And they called this little field bioastronautics. And I didn't even know it existed until I was, in my late teens, early 20s. But I was excited to find something that took my two passions and mashed them together.
So that was something you got onto before you went to university. So you knew like the area you wanted to get into. It wasn't something you kind of discovered after you got started.
It was somewhere in the middle. I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to do engineering. I knew that health stuff excited me. I knew that space stuff excited me. I didn't know that they could be done together until I
Yeah.
was at Vanderbilt University for undergrad, and then spending some time hunting in the early internet for things that had the word space and biomedical together. It turned out NASA was funding a group called NSBRI, the National Space Biomedical Research Institute. It's now a group called TRISH, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And all those big long acronyms meant where they were people who were thinking about the future of space travel through the lens of how do we keep people healthy there, and how do we use what we're learning in space to keep people healthy here on Earth.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's actually I get all of those emails from Trish, which is really interesting. And I remember one of them was, um, I think it was an experiment that I guess maybe Trish was funding through the ISS National Lab at the time, where they were trying to accelerate testing for determining kidney disease and kind of how what causes it potentially in a microgravity environment. So
Yeah.
I guess just to follow up a little bit on that, what is it about space and medical that is most interesting to you? Is it really the space travel part, or is it how, there's a unique way of doing experimentation and research that actually helps us here on Earth, or is it both?
I got hooked because of what it was doing to enable us to go to space. But I found over
Hmm.
the years that the more interesting stuff is what it's doing to enable life here on Earth. That when we go into space and we take away sedimentation and convection and buoyancy and these fundamental forces that you can't flip a G switch in the lab. I can't tell you how many
Hmm.
people came to my lab at MIT and said, I want to go to that room where you can turn off gravity. I mean, I wish it
Yeah.
existed, right? But we
Yeah.
we got to
Wow.
go flying on Vomit Comet airplanes.
I've seen that. Have you done one of those? I've seen.
Ah,
Oh, what is that like? Is it? I don't know. I'm not sure my stomach could handle it.
My stomach couldn't handle it either, but that was okay because I got to dance on the ceiling. When I was teaching, I took 23 of my students up for one of the earliest research flights that they did on the zero G airplane. And we were studying a wide range of different technologies and science. And there were two things that surprised me. One was the sensation. Like I felt that I had thought it would feel like falling. And it really felt for me like floating. Like I had just swallowed a bunch of helium balloons and just become
Mm,
wonderfully light. And that was really neat. The other thing was I'd been studying microgravity for years. I knew the physics, but when you see systems actually acting in microgravity, when you experience it yourself, it gives a depth to that understanding that you just can't do on paper. So I tell everyone out there, if you have a chance to go, absolutely go. If you have a chance to send students, all the better. I think that there was, for many years, NASA was sending students up on the reduced gravity program out of Ellington Field. Sad to see that go away, but now the commercial side is picking that back up again.
so what did you say it was called, the Vomit Comet?
Vomit
The
Comet.
nickname.
That
Yes.
is
That's
awesome.
so good.
Yeah. So airplanes
What great
flying in
marketing.
15,000-foot tall roller coasters. When you get just like a roller coaster at the bottom of the hill, you get pushed into your seat about 2 times your body weight. And at the top of the hill, you're coming up
Nuts.
out of your seat and you get about 15 seconds of free fall.
That is unbelievable. So you've done that. Have you ever jumped out of an airplane though?
Just once
Yeah.
was enough.
For recreational purposes? Just
Recreational
for fun, right?
purposes, strapped to
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. I've done that too years ago. I wouldn't do it now. I don't have the same, I don't know, risk tolerance as I did when I was like 23.
But would you strap yourself to a rocket, Rob?
Depending on the day, yes, I would. Um,
It's an interesting risk calculus, right?
it totally
Because
is.
for
Yeah.
me, that's been on my bucket list since literally as long as I can remember. If someone called me up and said, "Can you be here tomorrow? I've got a seat for you," I would be on the next
Yeah.
airplane.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Well,
I mean,
that's a good, yeah.
good
Sorry,
segue.
Tony.
Yeah,
I was
we're on
going to
the
say,
same wavelength, Rob.
yeah, see, Tony and I, we're just such good partners here. So speaking of which, and I want to ask you the question I think Tony also wants to ask you in a minute, but tell us how you led yourself to Blue Origin, because that's where I met you,
yeah.
and where I was super impressed with your energy and your ability to lead a team and all that. So I'm fast. I think we're both fascinated to see, how did you end up at Blue? What do you do at Blue? And my final question would be, how come you never got to fly on the new Shepard vehicle?
Well, I'll answer that last one first because I think we should
Okay.
be flying as many of the folks who are working in the space industry as possible. When I signed my contract at Blue Origin, I wrote in that they would give me a ticket. They crossed it back out, so I gave it
Really?
the old college try.
And
Yeah.
sure, good. Yeah.
But I was, a biomedical engineer and then an aerospace engineer doing research at
Mhm.
MIT for my graduate work. Spent some time at the X Prize Foundation learning how innovation works and how do you get teams to do amazing things. But was getting hungry to get back into being on the teams that were actually making that change in the world. So I started looking around the commercial space industry, and this is back in the 2009-10 timeframe.
Mm.
When I found Blue, I found a team that was doing three things I loved. One was that they were really sort of mission motivated. It was space for the benefit of Earth. It was opening the doors to more users. That was really aligned with my values. The second was that it was a team that had stable funding and stable direction, and that's not something you find very often in the space
Yep.
industry.
How
Yeah.
old were they when you in 2009?
Gosh, I guess the company formally got started in 2000, but it was really small for a long time.
Yeah.
So when I joined, we were about 180 employees.
Ah, okay,
To
that's
give
cool.
you
Wow.
context,
Yeah.
now I think they're about 14,000.
Yeah. Well.
But so they had this team also that was just incredible. Folks that were really, really sharp, but also the kind of people you wanted to work with. And so that combination of the right culture and the right values and the right resources made it a really attractive place to be. And coming in when it was still a startup was really fun because everything was possible. Well, maybe not everything. In the earliest days of Blue, they were actually studying the ways that you could sort of think about launch completely differently. They looked at railguns and mass drivers and warp
Mm.
speeds. And by the time I got there, we were pretty focused on getting New Shepard to start flying,
Mm.
starting the design of New Glenn, and thinking about where the trajectory could go that would open the doors of space to more.
Yeah. Man, I've got my fingers crossed for New Glenn this year. We're excited
Hmm.
about that. It's going to be great to see some competition in the industry for sure.
And then how did that, I mean, again, like I remember when I first met you was when Orbital Reef was getting kicked off. So tell us a little bit about how that all came to be.
Yeah, so I spent the first 6 or 7 years at Blue really focused on microgravity users on New Shepard. We were figuring out how do we open the doors to more educators, more students, more corporate research, more uh, designers, more artists, right? And opening up not just for tourism, but all the other things that the rocket could do. And I'm excited that that
Mm,
program's still off and running. But as New Shepard got to flying at rate, I had done the first 150 payloads. I was looking for the next thing. We started to talk about what was going to happen in LEO when the International Space Station retired. NASA was just starting to think through, ISS coming to the end of its life. Commercial was really the logical jumping off point. How do we go and make uh, low Earth orbit more efficient, more open, more collaborative than it was in the era of an sort of government owned and operated space station. And so Orbital Reef started coming together and became part of the program that's was called CLD, Commercial LEO Destinations. So looking to replace the ISS with something that could be next generation.
mm. Yeah, and I thought it was also cool too because I remember I was it the 2019 IEC conference in DC? Maybe it was a different conference where you guys announced it, and I thought it was really interesting. And the reason why it was so exciting for me was that it was a partnership. So I don't know if everyone thought it would be such a partnership, right? And so, what companies were involved in that again? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, so in the earliest days of Orbital Reef, it was Blue Origin, it was Sierra Space, Arizona State University, AWS, and our friends over at Amazon. We were working with a number of companies that were sort of on the implementation provider side. So it was really bringing together a wide range of organizations that had expertise. Boeing was involved in bringing their expertise in operating and
Hmm.
maintaining the ISS. And I think what we were trying to do it was to re-envision how space and logistics works. And I think
Hmm.
we'll come back to that theme maybe later in the conversation here. But it turns out that if you look at what drives low Earth orbit, it's getting things up, keeping them found in your environment in Leo, not losing them, and getting them back down. It turns out to be almost 70% of the costs of operating a space station today. And a lot of what will allow space to be increasingly more commercial is to accelerate the pace of space to the pace of business. When we run at the pace of a government agency, everything's just a little bit slow. But when you start to operate at the pace of business, then you open up all these other doors, whether it's to pharma and material science, or to things like tourism and making movies and all the other sort of commercial
Yep.
applications of space. They all
Yep.
open the doors more widely when you have a faster chain of logistics.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to today, I guess, and you're still in the payload business with a new company, the exploration company. And I was having I didn't know a lot about them, and I was having a little bit of a look, and it seems like it's got a really interesting sort of sustainability and interoperability sort of mission as well. Tell us a little bit about what they're doing, and what's unique about what you're doing over there.
Yeah, so Exploration Company was founded back in 2021, so we're just about 4 years
Pretty
old.
new. Yeah.
And in that time, we have built and launched two space missions. We have grown the team from four to over 300. And the reason you've never heard of us, maybe, is because headquarters is over in Europe. The company is actually headquartered jointly in Bordeaux, France, and Munich, Germany. We've got offices now in Torino, Italy, in Luxembourg, in Houston, Texas. Uh,
Terrible places. Why would anyone want to go visit Bordeaux,
I have to
France?
go once a quarter. I'm so sorry.
That's a hardship.
That's
You can
tough.
keep Houston.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly.
the sort of founding myths of the exploration company, it really comes out of two things. Our founder, Hélène Huby, was the vice president at Airbus for the Orion service modules, or the part that Europe is building that's getting us back to the moon, and was watching Europe go slower and slower as the US was accelerating faster and faster, and really wanted to see if we can push the pace of collaboration. And then also was seeing that space was one of those things that was knitting Europe together. right? If you look across the countries of Europe for hundreds and thousands of years, even they've been at war with each other, and we've been in this era of relative peace for the last few decades, and space has been one of those things that's been built collaborations. And we can see it back in it throughout history, right? Even in the heart of the Cold War, Soviet Union and America were finding ways to collaborate in space.
Mhm.
Scientists and educators have long found ways of collaborating. So with these two threads of how do we move faster and how do we build global collaborations, the exploration company took on the challenge of saying, it turns out that this logistics piece is one of those ways of doing that. So building capsules that can take things up to space and bring them home again. For those who are more familiar with the U.S. market, think SpaceX Dragon, right? That's sort of the equivalent. So we built a small capsule, 60 centimeters. We called it Bikini. It was our teeny weeny one, and it was designed to go up. It flew on the inaugural Ariane 6 mission back in 2024. Unfortunately, Ariane 6 had some problems with its upper stage, so that one's still in orbit. It hasn't gotten to come home yet. But this year we launched our next vehicle, 2.5 meters across, so the size of like a Volkswagen Beetle, 1.6 metric tons, 25 paying customers on board doing microgravity work, some marketing things, some technology development. That vehicle flew up out of Vandenberg in June. So we got a chance to take that up, do a few orbits of Earth, activated all of our payloads. We set the vehicle up, separated from the launcher, headed back through the atmosphere, and unfortunately lost it just as we went transonic, coming back down
Oh,
for
bummer.
landing. But sort of, we'll call it 80% success, and
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of learnings there. And the reason we're doing these things is because we're on our way to this sort of Dragon class vehicle, a 4 meter, 10 plus metric ton
Mhm.
cargo capsule that's able to go up to the International Space Station. Our first mission with NASA and ESA is scheduled for 2028. And then to go to the commercial LEO destinations after that, and to provide this routine service of taking cargo up and back down to enable
Mhm.
exploration, to enable science, to enable humans living and working in space.
Erica, we've interviewed a few international folks, and like one bloke we were talking to a couple of weeks ago, Will Crow. He's a founder of a company called Heo in Australia, and they were able to really find the success in a niche in their business because they were an Australian company operating in the US. They were able to do things because of regulation that American startups couldn't necessarily do at the time. Just wonder if does being a European company, does that bring benefits that American companies or other companies in other locations may not be able to realize?
Yeah, well, I think it's got a few things going for it. One is the power of the way that the European Space Agency knits together those countries, brings together talent from a lot of different places, and brings together technology. So I think the last time I heard, we have something like 20 plus countries represented in our workforce, and that brings those perspectives,
It,
as
it's
well
an
as
amazing community of science and research, and like you see, because being Rob and I obviously in the space industry as well, and we work with lots of European companies, and you
yeah.
see so many people in commercial industry that a lot of them have had a stint at ESA at some stage.
Yeah, and I think ESA also has its built-in demand, right? It has a desire to have capabilities that are built in Europe for Europe to play on the global stage as a collaborator. And we saw for the International Space Station, there used to be a vehicle called ATV that was taking cargo for Europe up to the space station. When that retired, Europe sort of lost its barter value that it was providing through that service. So there's a built-in market there, and not just to serve European needs, but for Europe to serve global needs. So I think that's been a really it's been a good catalyst for the growth of the exploration company. We've been able to bring in a lot of investment on the heels of that market, and the way it interacts with global markets. Largest Series B in European space history, largest Series A in European space history, fastest growing European space company for the last 3 years running. And with that, we've been able to secure major contracts for cargo resupply services for space agencies, as well as over $800 million in commercial contracts. So this is really one of those
Yeah.
catalysts that says, if we can bring private money in, we can bring in government demand, we can put the two things together, and then we have this springboard for growing even faster.
Is there demand for any kind of national security or defense related use cases or needs?
For sure, on both sides of the
Yeah,
pond. I think that
yeah.
when you look at what space vehicles do as they're going up and staying and coming back, there's all sorts of different applications. When I think about that sort of small, medium, and large trunk of our tree, you can branch off to hypersonics, things coming back
Mm,
in fast. You can branch
yep.
off to microgravity demonstrations of new technologies and in space demonstrations of new materials. And you can
Hmm.
also branch out to other destinations like cislunar space that allow you to be part of that logistics supply chain.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I do want to bring this up real quick. So you did do a TEDx, or maybe you've done multiple. I've watched the one in space democratization, and so I think for those listening, definitely check it out with Erica because I mean, a lot of what you're talking about right now, you mentioned, and I thought it was a pretty powerful talk. You don't see a lot of those. I think providing a vision for people that are just kind of interested in this area and want to know where it goes. Like it was really good. I think painting the picture of what's possible, and you're doing it. You're doing it now in an area that I think, it's funny when I first met you and you were working on Orbital Reef. I remember we were trying to think about on our side, like how do we help you in the broader, for a broader company perspective. How do we think through different experimentation? Are there new things we haven't thought about and all that? And it was always, frankly, somewhat of a challenge for me to figure out how do we best help in that regard, because I think experimentation is, I think you can get your head around it because there is the ISS and we know they're doing a lot of stuff up there, but it's not necessarily as publicized as it could be. Um, but things like Trish and a lot of like I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of we don't know what we might actually see in terms of R&D in space. It's just trying to open the door and seeing what people can do and how that might benefit various types of use cases that might be for space exploration and also those for here on Earth. So I think it's definitely an exciting area that you're in for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that duality is super important. And if you look at like the reports coming out of the U.S. National Academy of the Sciences, there's a thing called the decadal study that looks at the most important science of the last 10 years and the next 10 years. And it really shows in microgravity that you both have science that is enabled by space and science that is enabling space, right? You're playing both sides of that coin. And when you think about just the basics of the physics, right? We talked about how you can't flip the switch for gravity in your lab, but it means that
Hmm.
heavy things don't sink and light things don't rise. So you can get alloys of materials that you simply couldn't form on Earth.
Mm.
You had these
Interesting.
long periods of things staying really, really still and quiet, so you can grow larger protein crystals for drug
Yeah, right.
discovery. You can get novel formations of molecules for treating new kinds of conditions that you just can't make in the lab on Earth. And I think that
Yeah.
that's pretty powerful. We're starting to see now some real interest in semiconductor manufacturing and what happens
Hmm.
Mm.
if you were actually going to make the world's most efficient chips. Start by
Yep.
making the substrate in space, bring them back down to finish them up on the ground. So it's not just about what we do in space, but it's the ways in which it really all links together with global supply chains too.
So I think there is a misconception, however. I think you can wrap your head around that. But then there's this. I feel like there's this, and maybe you can help us with this. There seems to be this, I think, misconception that all that stuff's just going to cost way too much money. How in the heck can we do that, right? How can we, win the GPU race, by doing half of it up in orbit, right? Is there a misconception around that in terms of like the business of space where you see it? Or maybe there's another misconception that just kind of drives you crazy that um, really could be clarified, and if so, might bring new ideas to the front.
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways of slicing that, and it really depends on what the specific science is that you're doing. I'll take drug discovery. There's a really fascinating story that I think has been under amplified in the space world. Merck had a drug called Keytruda. And you can go to your pharmacy and fill a prescription for it today. But they
Sounds
were
like a drug. It's
it
it's got a
does.
name of a drug. I believe you.
But they took Keytruda up to space, and normally Keytruda, when it crystallizes, the same molecule sort of has an A form and a B form that it makes. And when you bring that down and you want to give the drug to a patient, because you've got these two forms, you've got to have a lot more of the drug to get the right amounts of each form, and you end up having to take an injection of the drug or an infusion, and there's some quality of life issues that go along with that drug. Um, when Merck took Keytruda up to space, they found that they got the C form, same molecule, just a different form of the crystal. And with that C form, they could actually do smaller delivery of the drug for the same efficacy. So now you go from having to
Wow.
go to your doctor's office to have a long infusion to something that can just be sort of injected at home. So that's great for patients, right?
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
the interesting thing there is that you don't have to make that drug in space. For that drug, they took up something on the order of like a quarter of a U, like a few
Mm.
grams of material, and then they were able to bring it back down, seed it into their terrestrial manufacturing processes, and make more. So the space piece in that case was just a discovery element. Here's how we go do incredible things back on the ground. In other pieces that we're talking about, whether it's fiber optics or semiconductors, there's probably a critical step where gravity is sort of getting in the way of doing good business, right? And so for
Hmm.
that, you have to fly up some amount of your raw materials, but it's probably not your full product, right? In the case of your chip wafers, maybe it's just the silicon carbide. In the case of your fiber optics, maybe it's just your glass preforms. So you're able to do some pieces of this that aren't everything. And to your point, though, the economics of space is driven by the economics of launch and reentry today, right? So
Yeah.
until we can bring down the cost of getting things there and getting them home, that's going to continue to be a barrier for this to be transformative in the markets. But I can tell
Yeah.
you, whether you're looking in the US or you're looking in Europe or you're looking in India or you're looking in China, this is the problem that everyone's trying to solve.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be first to the table.
Yeah.
And I think that the question is who.
Yeah.
I love these stories about how space, um, how science in space and how we can use near orbits to improve life on Earth. Like, I'm really interested in that. I'm less excited about getting strapped to a rocket and shot into space. Um, but like in that Merck example, so I assume that research was done on the International Space Station. Is that right?
Yeah, so Merck started
Yeah.
doing work in the early space shuttle days. That particular experiment was
Okay.
ISS.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, thinking forward to the future, I mean, there are a lot of companies in this space at the moment, unintended, to build commercial space stations. I mean, what do you see happening in the next sort of 5 to 10 years in this area?
So I think we've got a few things going on. So today there are two space stations in orbit, right? There's the International Space Station and there's Tiangong from the Chinese. We are hearing, India's interest in having their own capabilities in space. We're also seeing the movement to the commercial LEO destinations here in the U.S. that will serve global markets. My guess is that we will go from more than two to
Mm,
from two to more than two space stations. Whether that's three or four or
mm,
five, who knows? I think a lot depends on how quickly the markets grow. And we'll also see that there's free flyers. So actually, just this week there was a launch from Russia, a Bion spacecraft. Bion was an old design, started operating in the 1970s for doing untended science in a capsule that would go up and spend time in space and come home. This is the latest in a long series. It's been about a decade since they've launched. So curious to see that they're back at this model. But you're seeing it in companies like the Exploration Company. You're seeing it in the possibilities of vehicles like Dream Chaser that could go up, that could operate science without humans, where that makes more sense. And I think that there's going to be a balance of where do we need space stations and people to get the best science, the most efficiency, the most where can automation not take over. But there will also be science where you don't want people around for any number of
mm,
reasons. Maybe it's
yeah.
um, maybe you're doing discovery on a more dangerous chemical, or you need to have a pathogen in the system for testing, or maybe you just don't want an astronaut running on the treadmill next to your sensitive microgravity work. So I think we're going to see this balance of tended and untended space
Mm.
platforms that are increasingly opening up the doors and letting us move at the speed of business.
Are there particular industries that you think, like early on, will really be able to make big leaps? I mean, you talked about semiconductors, but what, just sort of based on your own experience, and what industries and what types of solutions do you think will be kind of lined up first? Do you think?
Well, it's interesting because this is not a new field, right?
Yeah,
We've long had access for even for commercial entities to space. The NASA was doing this in the 70s and 80s in certain ways. So
the
that's not
scale is going to be, yeah,
the
incredible.
scale is what changes. Right? So
Mm.
if you went to the International Space Station today and you had the next Keytruda moment, you had some blockbuster that needed to be really scaled up and produced in space. You couldn't have your own module on the ISS. You couldn't borrow 6 racks to go scale up. It's just not designed for that. It's designed for basic R&D. So the next generation of space stations, I think, is going to have that ability to take things to scale in ways that are really transformative.
And
It's not going to,
accessibility as well,
yeah. So physical accessibility, data
and economic
accessibility,
accessibility
economic
too, I would think.
accessibility,
Yeah.
international accessibility.
Yep.
So the International Space Station, really a narrow partnership. They've done a great job of opening those doors wider and wider. But if you look at the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, UNUSA, 102 members now, members of 102 nations are now
Wow.
members of that. So
Yeah.
so many countries are seeing that space has a piece of their economic growth, a piece of their national security, a piece of their self identity. So as more countries come into space, commercial opens the doors to even more of those.
Yeah. So, I mean, Erica, you're a true leader, thought leader, pathfinder in this industry. For people that want to get, they want to they want to get into the industry, they want to do something, they want to learn more. What do you recommend for those people? And they could be people that are they're young people, in high school, or they're people that are looking for a career change. Like, what are some of the things that you recommend for those folks that really want to be a part of this?
Well, clearly, they need to listen to more space podcasts. That's
I
the
agree,
general.
100%.
Uh,
Yep, that's table stakes.
That's table stakes. Reading good news sources, things like Space News and Payload and other sources that are coming out with regular updates get you a sense of what's going on in the industry as a whole.
There's some great news, like it's really come along. Like there's some really good competition in that new space now,
Absolutely.
yeah, bringing things along.
For students, I always say find the nearest conference to you. If you can't afford the tickets, offer to volunteer. Often you work a couple days at the desk and then you can get some time in the sessions. Uh, AIAA, the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, has a great series of local conferences in addition to their national ones. And if you want to go internationally, the International Astronautical Congress happens in a different country in the world every year. So this year,
That show is so good.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
I've
it's
never been. It's in
so
Sydney this year, next
In
it
month.
Sydney,
is.
Australia this year, yeah, and then going to Turkey the year after that. So,
Wow.
it will be coming back to the States probably in a few years for the folks that's easier for. But at the International Astronautical Congress, you have a group called SGAC, the Space Gen Advisory Council, that's specifically geared for getting young professionals around the world, sort of from college through age 35, engaged in the debates around
Well, I
what
should look
the
into
future of
that.
space
I
looks like.
fall within that time frame. Yeah, that age group.
Yeah, younger than ever, Rob. And then the other
You
one
guys
I,
are not
I
nice.
often point folks towards is the International Space University. So ISU, founded more than 30 years ago as a place to bring together students of space that are interested in space as an interdisciplinary form of study. So you get some space law, some space business, space engineering, space technology. The summer I was spent there, we had 93 students from 31 countries. So there was no better way to start to understand where these things all fit together.
One of the colleagues from my last team, who we both know, Rob Miriam.
Yeah.
Miriam Puerto. She's super smart. She did the ISU last year, and she's a real go getter. And she saw a hole in their curriculum around AI, and actually she just presented in Korea
Love that.
a
Oh,
couple of
really?
weeks ago. Yeah,
That's
and
awesome. Good
a
for her.
day long AI module. So hi Miriam, if you're listening, you better be listening.
Okay. We love you, Miriam. Um, the other thing, Tony, I was just actually thinking we should, and maybe we can work with Eric on a recommendation here. We haven't touched on space law, actually.
Mm.
And normally, I have a lot of lawyers in my family. I love the lawyers in my family. But I think that is a topic that I feel like that isn't really I don't see enough discussion around that, because there's going to be regulation. Yeah, I mean it's we talked in an episode, like it was a couple episodes ago, Eric, we were talking about how launching something into space is an export. I never even thought about that. Like how is that an
That
export?
was one of the first ones when the whole
Yeah,
the tariff thing kicked off, and there
yeah,
were some Canadian companies that were copying it with tariffs, trying to launch with SpaceX
yeah.
in California.
They were getting a tax on sending their spacecraft to launch at Vandenberg, I think it was actually in a spacecraft
Yeah.
SpaceX launch vehicle, and then there was like a loophole, I think, where th- I can't even remember how. Actually, we should look back at that, but how they could actually recover some of that cost. But the whole point, though, was that it was an export out of the U.S. It was imported and then exported, and I never even thought about why that would be an export. But anyway, I think the space law topic is actually pretty interesting because it seems to be very undefined still. And to figure out how people are thinking through that and what that looks like, I find would be pretty educational for people.
Yeah, well, I think not undefined. There's a large body of space law and space law programs and all those things
Mm,
since the Outer Space Treaty, way back when. But I think still evolving and evolving
Mm.
faster now than ever as we get to things like international collaborations and mega constellations, the production of new
yeah,
materials in space. How do you think about the regulatory, the legal, the contractual underpinnings that change all this? I think part of the reason that I'm in the sort of the business world today rather than a practicing engineer is that I was watching as I was doing my doctoral work in engineering and realizing that the things I wanted to do were going to be enabled by the basic science, but also enabled by the policymakers and the investors that were allowing the cool stuff to happen in engineering. And that
yeah.
intersection of how those things all fit together was sort of where I found my sweet spot.
That's pretty cool. Well, Erica, loved seeing you. I'm glad we could get this finally scheduled. It was so fun to talk to you. The one thing that Tony and I love to do at the end of these is we try to think of a funny question or like a fun question that we can ask you that maybe helps the listeners get to know you a little bit more as a person. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is the question we have for you. So if you could invent the ultimate space food that's both practical and delicious, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So I'm a total foodie. Anyone wants to talk
Mm,
space and food,
did
we
not
can, we
know
can do
that.
that. There's a long time I was thinking about a concept that I called Spock Tales, which is how do you make the best cocktails that could only be served in zero G. So they end up being spherical with like multiple layers, and there's pop rocks sending things out.
Ooh, yeah, all right.
So I think that
Oh,
there's a lot to be done in elevating our cocktail game in space.
yeah.
The other
What's
thing,
the
yeah, go ahead, Tony.
what's the I'm sure you've tried a lot of astronaut food. I assume you probably have. Just what's your favorite?
Um, so I was a space food tester for a summer when I was at Johnson Space Center as an intern. I had
Yes.
some barbecued tofu that was maybe not my favorite. We did a lot of taste testing of tortillas. It turns out tortillas are
Right.
way better than bread because they don't
Yeah,
crumble and they
I
don't
could
have
see that.
corners. Uh, so, uh, yeah, there was some good tortilla game there.
How was the freeze dried sushi? I bet that was good.
Ooh, that sounds terrible. But
Yeah.
there's some really cool stuff going on in cultivated meats these
Yeah.
days. And if you think
Yeah.
about where the future of science comes together with the future of food, it's in growing cells, it's in fermented foods, it's in the way that synbio comes together with all of this. There's all sorts of things we can nerd out on next time.
Yeah, I was uh, at a startup accelerator in Israel a couple of years ago, and they were getting some pictures from some aspiring entrepreneurs. And there was one of these companies where they were like 3D printing food, and they had this whole vision of this whole menu that they were going to offer.
Absolutely.
Well,
What
Rob,
about you, Tony? No, I'm gonna
okay,
ask you
so I
first. I'm
have
gonna ask you
actually put a
first.
little bit of
Veg
thought
I'm
into
sure it's
this.
Vegemite of some sort. It's gotta be.
No, I mean you can get Vegemite in a tube already, so I'm sure that's already been up to space. But not actually a food, but something would help with like I want to see the replicator from Star Trek. You put your pill in the machine, you tell it what you want, and out comes your roast chicken or whatever.
The diamond age is here.
But what would you want that machine spitting out that would be a delicious food for you?
Gosh, I don't know. I think the meat thing is probably the most interesting because I'm a meat eater. So I think like any advancements in the meat side of things, I think would be exciting for me.
Yeah. So besides the freeze-dried sushi, I think, I don't know. I guess the way that I look at it is it's gotta be something that I crave more often than not here. So probably something like pizza. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know if pizza would be good would it be good in microgravity environments, Erica? I think it would hold up pretty
Look
well,
for there's
right?
a great YouTube video. One of the Italian astronauts, I think it was Paolo Nespoli, brought up basically little crusts and all the ingredients for the team to make pizzas and spin them around in zero G in the
Ah,
space station.
interesting.
I
If
will
you've
look
got
it
an
up.
8-year-old in your life or an 8-year-old in your heart, check that one out.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
funny.
mean, Pizza the Hut lived in space, so like
He ate himself to death.
May the Schwartz be with you.
yeah.
That's right. I didn't know I was hitting on such a topic that was so well researched by Dr. Wagner here. That was awesome.
That is awesome.
Anyway,
Well, Erica, this has been an absolutely fabulous interview. I've learned so much, and actually, I've got to go and do a bunch more research into this. I really I hadn't personally sort of connected a lot of the dots about why, I guess, particularly around research in technology and medical technology, and how what these space stations are going to enable. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Rob. It was really nice to join you both.
So if people want to get in touch with you, or if they want to learn more about the exploration company, where can they find you?
Yes, we are at exploration.space on the web. You can find me on LinkedIn and at whatever nearest space conference is to you. I'm probably there.
Awesome. Are you going to IAC?
I will be heading down to Sydney. Look forward to seeing a
Good
lot
for
of
you.
folks
That's
upside
a
down.
awesome.
September in Sydney. It's going to be glorious.
Wow.
So good stuff. Well, look, thanks again, Erica. Great to see you, Rob. And for our listeners, thanks very much for joining us this week. If you love what we're doing, please rate us and write a review, and we'll see you next time.